Without further ado, I want to give it up to Dave from MongoDB, CEO, and he has a pretty illustrious career, such an illustrious career that I'd be remiss if I didn't let Dave explain all the wonderful things that he's done in his career and share with us this evening. So let's give a round of applause.
That was a nice punt, Mark. It's nice to be here. Just to give you a little bit of my background. Currently, I'm the president and CEO of MongoDB, next generation database company based here in New York and Palo Alto. We are global in scale and we're going after a massive opportunity. Before MongoDB, I was in venture capital. I was a partner at BladeLogic and at OpenView Ventures doing B2B investing. And I did that for about almost 3 years. And then before that, I was an operator. I founded a company called BladeLogic, which was founded in 2001. We took it public in 2007, and then it was acquired by BMC Software in 2008. And then I ended up as the president of BMC for a couple of years. And prior to that, I started another company that kind of saw the rise and fall of the internet bubble. So I have a mix of, I guess, operational, entrepreneurial, and investing experience. So thank you.
And one thing I like to have people share is one unique thing that folks might not necessarily know about.
I think the team in New York knows this about me, but I have a pretty cool ping pong game. So if you can beat me in ping pong, I'll make you an offer.
All right, that's a ping pong tournament in an offering. But we want to talk about this topic of being a CEO, but also having a really interesting perspective on sales. And you've had a lot of different roles in your career. You've been on the investor side, C-suite, you've been on the product side. So what's been your experience, just briefly, around understanding sales and understanding that aspect of your operational experience? What was like the first moment when you said, well, gee, I'm going to go out there and sell?
Yeah, so I started off my career, my training is, I'm trained as an engineer, but my background was not in sales, but ironically, one of the first assignments, I got hired into AT&T in kind of like a leadership development program where they gave me rotational assignments in a variety of functions, and the first assignment they gave me actually was in sales. And I ended up doing pretty well in it because, one, I kind of understood the products and I could, I guess, communicate the value proposition clearly, and I kind of brought more of an analytical mindset to sales. And I really liked being connected to sales because you felt like you really understood what was going on with customers, the market, and you really got a grounded view of where the business stood and what was good and not so good and what customers liked and didn't like. And so then I moved into marketing and product management and international, and I always missed my experience in sales because I felt like that's ultimately where the rubber met the road. Candidly, my peers, other technical people, I think, come to view sales actually initially as a bit of a necessary evil. They don't really view it as a very strategic role or a very, a function that can provide a competitive advantage. I've completely changed my mindset. I actually believe that in enterprise software, the best companies in the world can marry product excellence with go-to-market excellence. And I think today you do have a case where there's lots of founders and technical CEOs who sometimes view sales or go-to-market as a necessary evil, but don't really think about it strategically and don't really view it as a real competitive advantage, and hence don't really invest in it as they should, which then obviously doesn't yield the result that they should. So it tends to be a bit of a spiral that way. And then, if they do, they tend to take a very hands-off approach. So the sales leader then is kind of on their own, and there's no one who has a lot of empathy for their needs and what the sales organization wants. Obviously, you can't have a company without a great product, so I don't want to suggest that product knowledge and product skills are not important. It's critical to any business, but really the best companies can marry product excellence to go-to-market excellence.
Yeah, I think I see a lot of early-stage startups is that there's a huge reliance upon product, which makes sense because without the product, there's nothing to sell. But at the same time, there's this hesitance to really invest in sales, to your point. because I think part of it is that they don't understand or appreciate the value that sales provides, but also something you said, that sales or commercial operations can actually be a competitive advantage if you do well. So going from there, I mean, obviously, having seen your fair share of salespeople, sales executives, what's been your view of actually hiring a VP of sales? So when you started out or founding a company, at some point you had to pass it off to someone who wasn't a founder and actually had to do sales full time. So what was some of your perspective that you learned in that process?
So actually, I actually wrote a blog on this. You can actually Google it. It's called 12 Factors to Consider when Hiring a Head of Sales. And so I go through, I won't bore you with all 12 factors, but I'll kind of talk to some of the highlights. First one, I think, is first and foremost in recruiting. There has never been a great head of sales who can't recruit. That person does not exist. And I believe that the quality of any organization is directly correlated to the quality of its leadership. And so when I assess a leader, I immediately look at their organization, and because that tells me a lot about who they are and the kind of people that they can attract and retain. And so recruiting is first and foremost. The second thing I would say is around the science of sales. A lot of people, especially people not in sales, think sales is this art. You kind of, you just hire some reps and they do the magic, and then somehow deals magically appear. And I actually take the approach where sales is actually very much of a science. Where there's some fundamental kind of disciplines and functions required, all the way from defining a sales process, a qualification methodology, knowing how to forecast, etc. And so I look for someone who takes that same kind of orientation, but it's a very rigorous approach to the sales process. And third is there's got to be a lot of rigor around qualification. And I was going to ask this question, but in sales, I can never ask it again because now I'm on video, but usually I ask sales reps, if you were to rank, presentation skills, prospecting skills, qualification skills, and negotiation skills, which one would you rank the highest? And so, I get a variety of answers, but in my mind, there's by far only one answer, and that's qualification skills. And so the other skills, I don't want to suggest are not important, but if you can't qualify, you can't sell. And so that's an incredibly important skill.
Maybe we can just dig in on that for a while, because obviously I have some opinions on qualification and importance of it, but why do you think qualification is the most critical?
Well, you have to qualify a number of factors. You have to qualify what's the customer's problem. Then you have to qualify, can you actually solve that problem? You have to qualify what is the process by how this organization makes a decision. You have to qualify who are the buying personas, influences in the organization. Who's the economic buyer? Who's the technical buyer? We have this definition of a champion. A champion is someone that we define actually has the influence and the authority and the respect in the organization to actually help sell when you leave the building, and who will actually convince the organization to buy your goods and services. And then there's a difference between a champion and what we call a coach. A coach is someone who will tell you what's going on in the organization and who you have to kind of basically convince to get the deal over the line, but they won't put their neck out on the line for you. So they'll kind of whisper in your ear, but they won't publicly endorse you or your products. So knowing how to qualify the decision process, the decision criteria, knowing who your champion is, and is your champion stronger than your competitor's champion? Because if they're both recommending a solution, who's going to win? How do you qualify out the competition? And again, also another thing that people underestimate is what we call the paper process. So you can do all that work, but as we know, we live on the quarterly cadence. If you can't get the deal in before the end of the quarter, you missed your number, right? And so timing matters a lot. And so not just understanding, all the stakeholders, what the process is, but actually, okay, now that we got the deal, how do I get this through legal and through procurement to actually get the order to appear on the fax machine or on email? And so it's incredibly critical. And the reason people fail is because they haven't qualified adequately enough.
I want to just ask a quick question to the audience. How many folks here would you classify yourself as in sales at a really early stage company? Number of hands? Okay, so good number. You. The rest, I assume, you are probably in larger startups or more corporate entities. Because I did get a question from someone who came in before, who's trying to transition from being the founder of sales to conveying what they do in their heads to the first people they bring on the ground. So, do you have any kind of founder experiences with trying to transition your founder passion and your institutional sales knowledge into people you're bringing in?
Sure. One of the things that we spent a lot of time focusing on at BladeLogic was talking about the value proposition and trying to understand how could we communicate in a way that was relevant to the people we're trying to sell to. And my background has been primarily in infrastructure sales. So in infrastructure sales, unlike application sales, there's actually multiple personas. There's the ops team, there's the developers, there's the security folks, there's the support team. So each one has different nuances of what's important to them, where sometimes in the app world, you tend to have a common set of value propositions up and down the food chain. And so it's really important to understand, one, how do you, before you can talk about what you have to offer, you have to first talk about what the problems are, and how do you do that in a way that's relevant and credible, where they will invest the time to give you all that information. So we spend a lot of time educating our salespeople around messaging and how to kind of speak to those different personas. And the approach is to first understand the customer's problem, and then figure out how our solution maps to their problem, and then explain to them why we're uniquely positioned more than anyone else to help solve that problem. And so if you think about a buying process, there's actually 3 basic steps to a buying process. One is the customer goes through, what are my needs? Then the second stage is, what are my choices? And the third stage is, what are the risks of going with any one choice, right? So you need to understand where you are in that process to then appropriately message and have a process that appropriately deals with each of those stages.
Yeah, I think it's really critical that you get that sales messaging right, because then everything else in the chain, as you say, falls apart. Because you're not able to get the right value, talking to the right people, and so on. So, really interesting you mentioned that. On another note, how deep have you gotten in terms of the sales process as a CEO? You have all these different things you're doing. You also lead a company and you're responsible for revenue at the end of the day. So, do you ever dive deep into deals? How involved do you get from, in terms of the transactions that are going on?
Yes. So first, it comes down to the leadership team you build, and so I was fortunate enough to attract a really strong leader to MongoDB, who's someone who had worked with me previously, and so I knew culturally we were very aligned in terms of philosophy and this orientation around recruiting, viewing sales as a science, and then also qualification. And so, his name is Carlos Delatorre, and he basically built out the sales process, and obviously got input from a variety of different stakeholders, one of them being me, but I mean, he really drove the process, and it was important for him to do that because ultimately he has to own the process. But I felt very comfortable that the process that he was building was going to be the right one for the company. And I would say, in terms of how deeply I get involved in, I think many times I find this, like a lot of sales leaders focus exclusively on deals. What's going on with this deal? We need it for the quarter. What's going on with that big deal? It could be a huge whale that can make our year. We spend most of our time talking about people. So where I invest most of my time is with the sales leaders. We get together at least once a quarter, sometimes more frequently on calls, but usually once a quarter, and talk through what's going on, what happened last quarter, and kind of do a triage of what was the good, the bad, and the ugly of the quarter, what lessons did we learn, and again, oriented around some discussion on deals, but oriented around the people and what impact they had on those deals. Then we talk about the current organization and obviously talk about who they're recruiting, what their pipeline of recruits look like. So we spend a lot of time in terms of, because we're a growth business, and so we're constantly recruiting. And then we talk a lot about the current quarter and how the deals roll up by salesperson, in that leader's team, and why they think that deal is going to happen in the quarter. And then we talk about kind of a little bit long-term how the organization is set up for the rest of the year. And so, but the real orientation is around people. One, we're assessing the leader himself, in terms of their command of their organization, their command of their business, We're assessing that leaders' assessment of their own people, have they missed something, and then we're assessing the people themselves. And so that rigor around people orientation really helps drive our thinking around how we're planning and building out and how we think we're going to do for the year. And that's something I get involved with a lot. Obviously, our head of sales drives those meetings, but I'm in there, our CFO's in there, and a lot of other stakeholders for the business are in those meetings.
Sure. And in order to drive the business, obviously, there's certain metrics that you're looking at as a CEO. So how deeply are you looking at those metrics? I know some CEOs just care about, okay, what's forecast. Others want to dive into the actual pipeline, see, okay, what's going on? Do we have enough coming in? Where are things in the queue? Where are things falling out? So how involved are you, have you been in the past in terms of looking at the core sales metrics?
Well, obviously the forecast is really important. I mean, so at my weekly staff meeting, one of the first things on the agenda is our head of sales reviews the forecast for the current quarter and gives us, probably by after the first month, some sense of visibility on the next quarter. So we want to have a little bit longer term view, not just it's all about this quarter. But to me, the other metrics that really matter, if you think about the knobs that really impact sales, is one metric is recruiting, like how we're doing relative to the number of people we need to hire, and are we hiring appropriately? Two is productivity. In fact, I think the most important, at the end of the day, the most important and the most salient metric for any organization, not just for sales, but for the whole organization, is sales productivity. And let me explain what I mean. I think, no matter what function you play in the company, whether you're in marketing, in finance, in engineering, in support, whatever you do or don't do either helps or hurts sales productivity. So it's a metric to really galvanize the whole organization. So it's not really a measure just of the sales organization, it's a measure of the performance of the business. And that tells you a lot about how the business is doing. Another metric I look at is ramp times. And so one of the most fragile parts of any sales organization is those new reps who just joined. Now they're ramping appropriately because if they don't see a light at the end of the tunnel, then their morale's going to take a hit, and then they're going to start affecting everyone else. And so it's really important that those new reps, in fact, we ask our sales leaders to help those new leaders, new salespeople, help get their first deals. And then the other metric that I look at is also broad-based kind of performance across the organization. So if we're making a number but only 20% of the salespeople are hitting their number, that's a problem, right? So I think a rule of thumb is somewhere between 65 to 70% of the salespeople should be, so 60 to 70% of the people should be hitting their number if they've been there, if they're on quota, they're fully ramped. And that's not a sign of a healthy organization. If that number is a lot lower, that means something's fundamentally awry. And if it's really high, if it's like 99%, then you have to look at you have the right quotas in place. But broad-based performance is a sign of a healthy organization. I've seen many organizations declare a victory, they made the number, and it was really because of a function of one large deal, but it kind of masked the underlying problem that not a lot of reps were closing deals. It was, one or two deals that kind of really swung the needle. And so I view deals in kind of two categories, what I call base business, things that kind of like middle of the fairway deals. And I look at productivity of base business deals, and then if you have some whales, because whales can really skew the numbers, and then look at productivity when you include the whales. And that tells you a lot about the business. So we try and plan to hit our number doing our base business, and then the whales are just gravy on top.
I like the perspective because you're taking very much a holistic view of sales, and typically we get a little bit of tunnel vision. You look at deals, but in order to get deals, you get people, and you get them ramped up. So I want to just dive in a little bit on ramp time. So how fast, just as an example, like MongoDB, how fast should a rep be productive in your opinion?
So in enterprise sales, the rule of thumb is about 6 months. I'm happy to say actually we're doing far better than that. And so for competitive reasons, I'm not going to disclose that, but it's we've reduced ramp times by frankly more than half the ramp times since I've joined the company. And actually on the other side, on productivity, we've actually more than doubled productivity. And so we've seen a massive increase in productivity, reduction in ramp times, which has yielded great results. And so that's why we're starting to grow so quickly.
Is there something that you can share in terms of what was able to drive some of the productivity as well as the on-ramps?
Yeah, sure. So one is obviously the quality of people. I think there's a number of MongoDB people here, and I'm very proud to have them as my colleagues because we have a high bar. And so, like, the recruiting process is pretty rigorous. And
interviews.
I would say for an individual sales rep, it goes all the way up to our sales leader. I, in the early days, actually used to interview reps, but I ended up becoming a roadblock with my schedule, and I was just getting in the way. And so every rep ultimately does an interview with our sales leader, and then for every sales leader, I end up interviewing them. And so there's multiple steps in the process, and on top of that, we ask people to do what we call a challenge, which is essentially a simulation of kind of our process, and maybe simulating how you present our product to a hypothetical customer, and it's not so much that we expect you to know everything about a business or everything about a product, because we want to understand how you think. We want to understand, one, how smart you are, candidly, because we can't teach, if you haven't learned that by the time you apply, we're not going to fix that problem. And we also want to see how motivated you are, right? It just does require some preparation. It does require some intuition. It does require sometimes being creative and maybe calling to the organization saying, help me understand this technology because I don't completely get it. And we want to see that kind of ingenuity so that we'll see how you it'll tell us a lot of how you're going to do once you work for us. And so, and we're pretty rigorous, and there's no kind of special, rules for special friends. In fact, I made a referral of someone who didn't make the cut, and it was someone I've known for a long time. Someone who was a friend of the family and didn't make the cut, and didn't make the cut.
It's good to have standards, right? I'm sure it was just an error. Something got mixed up along the way, but the other part of it, though, is you may get to great people. And this is something I talked to Mark Baird about when he spoke. A large part of the process is thinking about hiring post-hire. So the onboarding process also becomes really rigorous, making sure that if they're doing a good job on their end, then it means that their onboarding process is working and weeding out the people that aren't necessarily going to succeed in HubSpot, in that example. So are the things that you're doing just from an onboarding and training perspective, as well as a coaching perspective?
Yes. So as I said in the beginning, I actually think one of the hallmarks of what we do at MongoDB is around development. Just to give you a statistic, serious decisions, things that the average sales rep in an average software company typically gets about $5,000 worth of training a year. We calculate that we spend somewhere around $25,000 per year per rep. So we invest 5x the average. And that's, so we provide training when people come on board. We provide training, like once they've been in the field for a couple months, maybe even a couple quarters, so that now they're know enough to be dangerous and they come back, and the sophistication of their questions and the sophistication of the training is at another level. We provide a lot of kind of weekly self-serve training, as well as sometimes internal webinars and so forth. So, and we have a whole team dedicated to just enablement. And that's not just viewed as a nice to have, it's viewed as a must have. And we are very, very particular about the people in that group because, training has a huge implication on ramp times, right? And so one of the reasons we've kind of more than halved our ramp times is the investment in enablement and training. And that's really, really something that we take very, very seriously. And I see a lot of companies talk a big game about training, but at the end of the day, they kind of do a little bit of product training, and then they're kind of off. The other thing I would say is that we hold our leaders accountable for this. So in fact, if you were to describe to me what we expect from leaders, we essentially expect them to do three things: recruit, develop, and execute. And if you think about why a rep fails for one of two reasons. You either hire the wrong person, or you didn't develop them to get them to execute. In either case, whose fault is that? It's the leader's fault, or the person who hired that rep. So we hold our leaders accountable for not just recruiting high quality people, but making sure they're developed. And that really drives a high performance kind of culture.
And you hit my very next question on culture. But I also want to let this be an opportunity for folks. If you have questions, this is like our opportunity as a community to to listen to a really great leader. So let's take some questions now. Please.
Just one on productivity. You've referred to productivity. Can you just give us a sense of what sales productivity metrics?
Okay, the question is, what do you mean specifically around sales productivity? Maybe give some examples.
So yes, so just to be more precise, so we measure productivity by how much business did we do in that quarter, by the number of reps we did in that quarter, and we look at 2 dimensions, one by all reps, and 2 by ramped reps. And the more relevant metric is what are our ramped reps producing in that particular quarter. So it's really a very simple math equation, and then we measure that religiously. And I'm happy to say that that number is more than doubled.
So you think that's attributable to a lot of the coaching and training provided?
It's attributable to the people we recruit, the leaders we have, the training we deliver, and just the rigor around our sales process and qualification.
Maybe just state your name.
Hi, my name's Maddie.
Hi,
I work with Beth Recruiting. So I know it might seem like a narrow question, but from a recruiter standpoint, what's one quality that you wish recruiters, either like internal leadership hiring managers or external like agencies, were kind of vetting out beforehand? If there's one quality you look for in a candidate.
Okay. So what's the number one trait that you would wish recruiters did a better job in terms of vetting sales candidates?
Yeah, I think there's a structural problem with recruiters. So I will tell you that probably on a daily basis, I get emails from at least 5 to 10 recruiters on a daily basis, and I'm just hitting delete. The challenge is that one, there's a structural challenge around incentives. So recruiters tend to, obviously, they get paid by the number of people they place, and so by definition, they're incented to drive a lot of volume. And while we want to hire a lot of people, we also have a huge incentive on quality, because the cost of making a bad hire is incredibly punitive to our business. Because if we hire someone, by the time we expect them to ramp, they haven't ramped, it's been 6 months in, and then maybe a quarter later we say it's not working out. So you lost 9 months, and then you take another quarter to find someone. So you essentially lost a year. So if your productivity is, say, on average, 1.5 million, you've lost 1.5 million plus the cost of a rep, plus now all the ramp time for the new rep. So all in, it's over $2 million per bad hire for a field rep. Obviously, for inside sales rep, it'll be proportionally lower. And so we are very, very rigorous about the quality. And so the challenge we have with many recruiters, and obviously I can't speak to your firm, is are people really vetting the quality of the candidates, and are they really thinking about the profile of the candidates for the company that we are, right? Because it tends to be like a one size fits all. So, for example, we sell infrastructure software. So does that person have any background? We're not a large company. I mean, we may be larger than most startups, but we still consider ourselves a startup. So this person used to not just selling the product, but selling themselves and going into an account where there's no existing relationships. And so these are all skills that you get, and we sell deals that range from high 5 figures or mid 5 figures to all the way to 7-figure deals. So does this rep have the profile where you can say this person has all the attributes, skills to be a worthy candidate at MongoDB? And we find that in many cases, many of these recruiters don't do that vetting. They're just kind of trying to, what I call, pump and dump a lot of candidates. And so, we've talked to a lot of them. Now, our sales leadership team does spend a lot of time with recruiters. They tend to gravitate to the better recruiters. I don't want to say that we don't like recruiters, but it's a function of vetting a lot of people and really finding people who really get it. And a big part of a recruiter's job is to sell the candidate before we talk to them, right? Because if we're coming in and they're cold and they're still not really, they don't know much about us and don't know much about the opportunity, and they're kind of wondering why we're talking to them, the recruiter has done a very good job. Now, we don't expect the recruiter to do all the selling, but they should have qualified the candidate enough that we feel like it's worth our time to invest in that recruit.
Great point. Gentleman back, the blue shirt.
Sam, yeah, Altus.
Hi, Sam.
I'm very interested in the productivity story, and specifically, did you change in the processes? Because a lot of sales professionals complain about the amount of time you're spending doing the clerical work, CRM, the rigor forecast process, on, as opposed to selling. Was that
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know.
But just the question, it sounds like it's more around like, the technology aspect of sales productivity. What are some things you did? Because obviously things like CRM can be, quite frankly, a time suck.
Yeah, so listen, every job, including mine, there's certain parts of the job that you just don't like, right? And that's the reality. So if someone's complaining about entering their forecast information into Salesforce, you're not going to get a very sympathetic ear. But if you're complaining that to get a deal done, you have to work through a lot of bureaucracy in the organization. You have to talk to a legal organization that's not very responsive, or you have to talk to maybe the technical resources who are not available when you need them to go visit a customer. That's a problem, right? So we are very, very focused. We do everything in our power to make our salespeople successful. Sometimes we may not do certain things well, and we'll hopefully remedy that very, very quickly, but we do everything in our power. So this is less, we obviously try and minimize as much clerical work salespeople do, but there's a bare minimum. You have to know what deals you're working on, you have to get an update of how the deal is tracking, and so forth. And that's part and parcel of a sales job. But we spend a lot of time trying to make sure, not just through kind of investments in enablement and training, but also through just setting them up for success in terms of are they being given a good territory. Like, one of the classic mistakes I see sales leaders do is as they add more and more people, the reps who've been there a while have all the best accounts. So the new reps show up and they say, well, I've got basically Boise, Idaho, to call on, and
Hot territory.
Right? And so a sales leader has to be equitable. Now, obviously, someone's worked the account for a long time, you're not going to take that account away from them, but they have to look at how they've allocated the accounts and said, am I setting this new rep up for success? Like, will they be set up for success if they can be successful? So, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to fundamentals, which is, are you recruiting good people? Do you have, are you training them well? And are you giving them good leaders to help guide them to that ramp curve and then ultimately execute consistently and execute well?
Yeah, I like the fact that you actively look at where the friction points internally that people are getting stuck at. And that was actually a big challenge when, for example, when I was at Oracle, we had all these friction points and just to get a deal through just approvals to take weeks, right? And oftentimes you don't have weeks in some of these deals. Question over here to the side.
Yeah.
Nate? Hi, Victor.
I agree with what you said at the beginning about a lot of technical founders or subject matter founders not really appreciating the importance of sales. And I found one way to help articulate that is talk about the value of sales as, the voice of the customer for product development. So can you speak to that at all in your organization? Are there any processes that you have in place where some of the learnings about the market that sales people are requiring as they do their job, how that gets embedded into the development of the market?
So really interesting question about the early stage sales from a founder perspective. Maybe to think about sales from the perspective of the customer development side and voice of the customer, and if you have any perspectives on that.
Yeah, I think a great sales organization can be a huge competitive advantage in terms of intelligence you get from the market, in terms of why your customers are buying, what the competition is doing, what new threats are emerging, or what new buying behaviors or what new technologies are kind of emerging that may influence or impact your business. And so it's not the only source of information, but it's a really, really good source of information. So in contrast, a bad sales organization, and I've seen that both as an operator as well as an investor, a bad sales organization will always complain, it's not me, it's the product, it's the market, it's this, it's that. And it's really tough to distill, do they really have a valid concern, or is this just someone making excuses? And so a great sales organization can really vet out, no, we have an issue. If we don't have this feature, we're going to lose X deals. And so that becomes incredibly valuable. And so we feed that typically through our technical sales organization, because they really understand at a real intimate level what the issues are, what the issues may be in the product. And then our head of sales and our head of our technical pre-sale organization is on what we have our product steering committee that talks through like the product roadmap, and that's where we decide product priorities. So they have a huge voice in actually driving our product roadmap.
So, quick question, follow up on that. I mean, was it ever a situation where some of that tribal knowledge out in the field got back to you and made you actually rethink a lot about what the product was or the value proposition?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at BladeLogic, we were moving fast, and I mean, I don't want to get into arcane, details that won't be relevant to most people, but we saw kind of emerging trends. Like one of the big emerging trends when I was running BladeLogic was virtualization. Like, we were a software to manage servers, and all of a sudden this thing called virtualization came out, and now one physical server could be 5 virtual servers. And customers said, hey, I just want to pay the same price. And we said, wait a minute, you're actually managing a box now that's 5 times more complex, and we're adding value to you, so why should we just, hand that value, why would we get our fair share? So those kinds of insights that we get from our salespeople and our technical pre-salespeople is incredibly valuable to helping us think through our product roadmap.
Here.
Hi, you mentioned before talking about sales training. So how to prioritize it? Because my experience is the best salespeople always learning. But on the other hand, I was thinking, well, team training, what's out in the field, what's the customer, and not networking. So you really, it's not the training that goes to that. So how do you prioritize it? How do you get them excited about it? So that you're not lazy and trying to stick with the details.
The prioritization of training is a huge issue I see often in a lot of companies. They just want to go out there and sell, and then they condense training into a day of product training somewhere in Vegas, and then we'll get drunk afterwards, which seems totally counterproductive. So what have you done in terms of making training into an organization?
Well, if you remember, we hold our sales leaders accountable for the development of their people. So that drives the fact that sales training is not just an optional exercise, it's a mandatory exercise. That's one. Two, we really put a lot of rigor into our training. That you're right, it can't be, people think it's a complete waste of time. So we actually give people homework before they come to training, so there's a certain base level set of knowledge. And by the way, they get a test on day 1. So if we know someone to do the we'll know someone who did the homework right away, and you know what, their manager will get a note right away. They get one chance to do it right. They'll be sent home, and then they'll come back, and if they fail again, they're gone. And so, because we take this very seriously, remember, we're doing everything in our power to make our salespeople successful. So it's not meant to be punitive, but if you don't do your part, then we can't really help you. Then during the training, it's not just people getting lectured and kind of PowerPointed to death, but there's a lot of role plays, there's a lot of exercises, there's a lot of group discussions, and we ask at the end people to present on the product and to kind of a hypothetical customer. So it really forces people to internalize the message and internalize the training. And at the end, there's also a test. So we want to also measure, have you learned a base level of knowledge for you to kind of graduate from this camp. So it is a real rigorous program. And of course, we reward our top performers, and then we find typically the people who are, did well, end up doing really well in the field. So there's a clear correlation between the people who do well in class and the people who do well in the field.
Sure. Sim.
For that diversity, can you describe how you deal with what you need to have diversity?
Yeah, that's another common challenge we see just in sales forces. I mean, we had a talk about this back in March. It was really the glaring lack of diversity on sales teams, particularly in the B2B enterprise space. And are there things or programs that you have in place to encourage that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's something that's not just important in sales, but it's important for the entire company. And so, unfortunately, in tech, the gender and diversity has multiple definitions. One is just gender. You can have multiple definitions of diversity, but focusing on gender, we clearly need to do more in across organization. We have a lot of outreach on a variety of different disciplines, and I would say that right now our diversity statistics in sales are not great. I mean, we're looking. So if there's women salespeople who are interested, please see me afterwards, because we're very interested in hiring more women into our company, and it's something that we really value. It's part of our value system. And again, like I said, this is not a sales problem. We have the same issue in engineering, same issue in marketing. Well, actually, marketing, I think we have the best diversity statistics, but still, you can get better, as well as our services and support organization.
Yes, and I was looking at your job description.
was, your job definitions might, create there might be some inherent bias in how the jobs are defined, and we completely agree. And the other thing that we're doing, I just recruited a new head of recruiting, and one of the things that we're doing is kind of training people on unconscious bias. And so it's not just the job description, it's also the interview process. Do we turn people off in terms of how we pose questions? Because we're not going to lower the bar. I don't want to say that we're going to lower the bar because that's not acceptable, but we definitely want to be an attractive company. And by the way, the key point I want to say is, in my career, a lot of gender or diversity initiatives I see are kind of masked under this is the morally right thing to do. And that's true. For me, actually, the real issue is this is the smart thing to do, because you would look at Morgan Stanley came out with a study about a month ago that showed on an equity return basis, companies that were more diverse provided better equity return. So it is truly the smart thing to do.
Yeah, I read the same report, and it was really just eye-opening. It was how diversity has a very measurable business ROI to it. You have a better business because you take the efforts. You have different voices, whether it's gender, ethnicity, diversity, whatever type of diversity you're looking at, you just have a better organization. Question up here. Hi, Paul.
How do we give flexible candidate incentivize to diversify the various sales?
Candidate lead flow, how to actually source. Because obviously when you're in high growth mode.
Right. So our philosophy is that you're always recruiting, because recruiting is kind of like pipeline generation. If you do it for a while and you stop, your pipeline is going to basically wane. And if you do it all the time, you'll always have a healthy pipeline. So we do it both in terms of. So ultimately, the other point I want to make is that we hold our hiring leaders, not just the sales, across the entire company accountable for hiring. So a leader can never say, "Well, recruiting didn't give me enough, lead flow," because the hiring manager, if they don't feel like they're getting enough lead flow, they need to go to the recruiting organization and say, "What's going on? Am I not, am I maybe not attracting a large applicant pool, or is there something about the job that people don't like, or is maybe am I off in terms of what I'm paying and so forth?" It's really trying to understand and really own the issue. That being said, we also have a recruiting organization where we recognize it's a very competitive market, and the sad truth is the best people don't need jobs, right? So we're actually trying to recruit people who are actually probably paid pretty well, are pretty happy, and are treated really well in the company they're at. So it makes the challenge of recruiting them that much harder, because no one wants to see the top people go. So it really puts a lot of onus on us to communicate, why they should come here, why they can build, not just have a great job and a great career, which is why we focus a lot on development. And one of the things about development is that you can then develop people who go from reps to leaders to ultimately become CROs. And many people who started with me as reps are now CROs of venture-backed A+ companies. And so I'm very proud of that. In fact, I would say over 20 people today have some significant senior sales leadership role of some of the top venture-backed companies, enterprise software venture-backed companies, and that didn't happen by accident. And so, in our reputation as such, is strong enough that people know that the rigor we put in and we produce these kind of people say that, I want people who came out of that system. And so that's really, really important.
If you have internal recruiting functions, that you use external agencies, how does that work?
So the question is, do we have internal recruiting and external agency? We do both. So we have, because we're growing too fast, we can't rely only on one channel. Obviously, ideally, you want more and more of it to come from internal recruits, but we're moving too quickly. And I find that sales, unlike other functions, the best recruiters tend to be, so it may sound like I'm contradicting myself, but some of the best recruiters are actually independent, because they know, the best recruiters know where the best reps are, and they know what's going on, and they have a really good feel for the kind of people we're looking for, and so they tend to source us high quality candidates.
Yeah. You said something there before, well, I thought it was really amazing. I don't know if you've seen the cartoon, but it goes, the best leaders are the ones that make leaders that make leaders. So I think it's really impressive that you've been able to kind of develop that pipeline of really impressive talent. In the back.
Getting back to your comments on product development, what are your expectations of sales following an unforeseen significant setback in product product development, product roadmap that was used to forecast revenue?
So thanks again. So I guess the question is issues around product development and expectations that sales are going to actually set, or have the expectations that they're selling something that may not necessarily be there.
I understand the question. One of the things that we focus a lot on is sell what you have, not what you hope to have. And so that's really, really important because you don't want to oversell and then you're relying on some new feature. By the way, it creates, if there's finance people in the room, it creates huge rev rec problems because you can't recognize any revenue on deliverables that you haven't provided at the time you want to recognize the revenue. And so it's really important to sell what you have, not what you hope to have. And I find that a lot of people try and sell the new shiny feature, the new capability, and kind of overemphasize that versus the core value. Now, if you have a fundamental product round, that's a different issue. But if it's truly like, hey, this new release is going to have X, Y, and Z features, and you oversell that, there are, even the best development organizations may have delays, there may be some snafu that comes up. So if you're betting on some new feature to close the deal, what we encourage is that it needs to be kind of floated early and up to the product management organization to make sure, one, that there's not too many workarounds to address that requirement, and two, if it's really requiring next release, then we surface that as a potential risk in the forecast. But one thing I should say is, again, great salespeople do not whine and complain about product. So at MongoDB, when I came in, I kind of did a pretty significant change of the sales organization. When I first got there, everyone was complaining, and we're an open source company, so obviously you can imagine the salesperson saying, oh my God, we give away all the products, it's so hard to sell, the proprietary features are so small compared to the core product, and we can't. And now the new sales organization that we have doesn't complain about that. It's kind of fascinating. And so I think it speaks also, and I'm not suggesting anything with your question, but I have seen weak sales organizations complain a lot about the quality of the product or the quality of the software.
Suppose really what you want is your organization focused on value and understanding what is the buyer really looking for, what's the challenge that they're trying to solve, and actually talk to that as well. They're trying to focus in on, okay, here's some features and functions. I want to ask one last. Okay.
Sure.
Name.
I'm sorry, that's Seth from
Thanks.
What is the organization as a whole? Do you have SDRs that generate leads for senior reps that say we go out there, or senior reps that go out there and hire?
So, sales specialization. How do you organize your sales organization?
So actually, we actually have a fairly, I would say, complex organization because our market is a barbell market. So we have customers at the very high end. So, for example, 50%, north of 50% of the Fortune 100 are customers. And then we have like startups you've never heard of who are also our customers. And so we take a bifurcated approach in terms of how we go to market. So customers with under 250 million revenue, we go through our own, we have an inside sales organization. And then customers with over 250 million revenue, we go through a direct field organization. But for both organizations, we also have an SDR organization that is what we call kind of identifies the opportunities and qualifies the opportunities and serves those to the field. Now, one thing we haven't talked about is as much rigor and process we put into sales, we also spend a lot of time and a lot of rigor around our inbound demand gen process. So our CMO is an expert in inbound demand gen, and our inbound demand gen kind of infrastructure actually comprises over 15 different technologies, and we have a lot of rigor in terms of how we identify opportunities, what nurture tracks we have depending on the persona and where they are in the buying process, and how we nurture them over time. And actually right now, our challenge is not the amount of leads we have, but actually, there's a bottleneck in terms of the number of SDRs we have to kind of qualify those opportunities. But that's also a source. Now, having said that, culturally, we don't let the sales organization use that as an excuse and say, hey, I can't make my number because marketing didn't feed me enough sales. That's a classic symptom I see in a lot of companies. Ultimately, sales is accountable for making their numbers, but clearly, marketing can be a massive accelerant in terms of that business by providing high-quality leads to the sales organization. And then on top of that, we also ask the salespeople, because they're accountable for any number, they have their own, what we call their pipeline generation process, where they do outbound pipeline generation. And they'll try and figure out what activities in their account. They'll, for example, look at LinkedIn and see how many people have MongoDB listed as a skill. They'll look at where are people downloading software and so forth. And then they triangulate on the high target accounts in their territory. And every week, there's one day devoted to just outbound pipeline generation. And that is, again, something that we take very seriously. It's not like, hey, when you have time, do it. It is a one day that's sacrosanct for us to do pipeline generation. And before they do it, they actually have to prepare lists of customers and names that they're going to call. So there's a real effort. And again, we do all this because we want to drive high performance. And you know, as you can imagine, in the beginning, people are like, really? I mean, you know, this is not something most companies do. Now, it's actually culturally, you know, something that people want to do because they've seen the results of what they're doing. I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, every job has its downsides or issues. I mean, at the end of the day, no one really likes to do pipeline generation. You know, let's be clear. But if you create it to be a part of your system, and part of your process, then everyone does it, and they actually do it quite well.
Yeah, I think there's this attitude where if you're a closer, you don't prosper. I've never heard of the guys like that. If you're a salesperson, you should know how to prospect, and it should be part of your regular process. Also, part of the thing you mentioned, demand generation. We actually have an event next Monday, if you're around, to be actually doing, because it's a popular topic, demand generation 101. We have Jeff Reekers, a handshake, who's going to basically go through like, what is demand gen, what are channels, what are all the processes and technologies. So if you're interested in all that topic, check it out at our Brooklyn sales meetup next Monday. But I want to close with one last question. Do you have just like maybe a little while to stick around if you have questions that you want to ask you?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. So
I couldn't really say no. I guess.
I am putting you on the spot, but we'll be respectful of your time. But really appreciate your being here. But before we close out, I always ask every speaker: has there been a book or movement you found particularly inspiring recently that maybe change your viewpoint? It doesn't necessarily have to be sales specifically, but just something that you felt really moved you.
I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan. Coming back from the dead is a good thing.
Game of Thrones is good.
I would say that probably the seminal business book that I've read that's really stuck with me. Actually, there's two books. One is Good to Great by Stephen Collins.
Great book.
And I think that's a really excellent book in terms of diagnosing what the best companies do and what are the some of the fundamental characteristics of those companies. And then the other book that I think is also the seminal management book is High Output Management by Andy Grove, who just recently passed away. I mean, if you want to be a leader and you aspire to, whether you're a leader of a sales organization or a leader of an engineering organization, any function, that book really is, I think, the Bible on leadership.
Really appreciate it. This is really awesome. Thank you so much for coming here.